So we got a new sponsor, Ballogy. Appreciate the people at Ballogy for showing some love in us. That was kind of a unexpected news bit for us to in our brief hiatus that we got a new sponsor. So let me tell you a little bit about our friends at Ballogy. Ballogy is built for coaches like you. It gives real data on player development, saves you time, and ensures your players are training the right way. With verified skill assessments, AI driven training, and direct recruiting connections, it levels the playing field for every athlete, no matter where they're from. If you're serious about player development and accountability, why not try Ballogy? Join thousands of teams, coaches, and organizations already using Ballogy to elevate their game. Download the Ballogy app today. Bruni, you are a coach yourself.
I was about to
Ballogy
say,
is something you're always looking for information assessments and any way you can get your team right. Sounds like Ballogy could be right up your alley too.
I will have a full review next podcast of how we
There we
use it.
go.
Um, so yes, we will. We don't have a tournament this weekend. We have 2 weeks off. Thankfully, we've been everywhere, so we'll be back
Nice.
at it, and I will have the full review for you for Ballogy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Zone Star State podcast. I'm Matthew Bruni, and joining me once again is Ishmael Johnson. And today, we are joined by Billy Embody, who covers SMU for On 3 with On the Pony Express. Billy, how you doing today?
Doing well, guys. How are you?
Doing great.
Good,
Doing
man.
great. It's that weird part of the year, where it's May and it's not football season, it's not basketball season, and it's honestly not even like their off seasons anymore. So it's kind of just, I mean, it's recruiting, obviously, but other than that, it's just kind of the middle ground, especially for us, a basketball podcast right now. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. It's for the next, week and a half or 11 days. We won't have any really official visits, at least in my world. And so that makes it hard to kind of navigate. There's no portal. There's no workouts. There's no postseason. If your school doesn't have baseball or softball, you're really up a creek. So it's a good recharge time before June gets crazy. And at least the coaches are out on the road recruiting, and the open period this past weekend was there too.
Yeah. Obviously, we'll talk basketball here. We'll talk the men's first, and then we'll touch a little bit on the women's side as well. Year one for Andy Enfield comes over. It was a big splash for SMU, obviously. Nobody was sure about exactly what to make expectations for him going into it. They end up 24-11 overall, 13-7 in the ACC, a massive success. We even got to the point on here where we were like, can they get an at-large bid for the tournament? Which is incredible to think about. Just how do you kind of encapsulate what year one was for Andy Enfield and SMU?
Man, I think it was a great learning experience for the team as a whole. They lose a lot off of this roster, but they also retain a lot. And we can talk about that eventually, I'm sure. But, to get an entirely new roster put together off a team where you lost Zurich Phelps and you lost some other key players, and to go tied for fourth in the regular season of the ACC. Now, we could talk about the overall league and it was down and all of those things, but no one was expecting that. I kind of thought that they could be middle of the road, just kind of there. Maybe you would get a splash win, which is kind of funny now looking back. They couldn't get, one really big splash win in a sense, and they would lose, a fair amount of league games. But they would give you a little bit of hope that in year two, wow, okay, all right, they can do this. We know Andy Enfield can recruit. They had one of their best recruiting classes in modern program history under him, signed and sealed by the time the season really got going. And so the promise of what Andy Enfield can do was kind of there. It was, even going into the season, it was look at this momentum. He just needed a fresh start. He gets it in Dallas, and things were looking up. But I think if you look back on the season and they don't lose a Matt Cross game one, I mean, I think it was like 4 minutes in, and they ended up losing him for a few games there with that hip back deal thing that he had to manage the rest of the season. And Samet Yigitolu maybe plays against Butler and gets cleared in time for that. Maybe they're able to find a way to get a signature type of win. I think Samet's first game was maybe Mississippi State or something like that. Feels like a lifetime ago now, but they couldn't get that one. So they missed some opportunities for sure to make a splash. And I think that maybe, waters down the season, not one win.
Yeah.
And that ended up hurting their resume. But overall, I mean, if you really step back and say, what were the expectations versus what did they need to accomplish? They accomplished everything they needed to. They needed to recruit well from the high school ranks, and they needed to really just show that they're going to have a good competitive basketball team most nights. And they did that. Duke was just so good. I think they were shell shocked against North Carolina. They lost Boobie Miller late in the season for some critical games against some good teams, and they just weren't able to kind of have the, I think, continuity and overall flow that they needed against those good teams because of that. And they missed out on some key opportunities to get wins.
Yeah, I guess for me, you mentioned a lot of like the near opportunities, just needing that kind of that big win, that signature win. But overall, how much did this year kind of surprise a lot of people in terms of how well this team gelled, how well they already reflected a lot of Andy Enfield's style, especially coming from, I mean, part of my expectation for them not being a real competitive team in the ACC this year was going from Rob Lanier style to Andy Enfield style, in addition to the roster addition. But how surprising was it, and then how kind of pleasing to the fan base was it that a lot more probably clicked in that year one than people expected?
Yeah, I think it was very surprising. I think most people had low expectations, but it's also that hard situation where college basketball is much more of a quick turn than
Sure.
other sports because of free agency. We'll just whittle it all down to that.
Yeah.
And SMU was able to go out and get some big names that
Mhm.
really gelled, like you said, and they gelled offensively. And whenever you gel offensively like that, and I equated it multiple times to covering Will Wade's first LSU team. They couldn't stop anything. They could not stop me or Matty B or you ish like out there playing 3-on-5, but they put up a bunch of points, and that kind of got people excited, and they hit on a couple of key recruits for the future that got the excitement going for that future. And I think that's what SMU did this year. They would like to play better defense. They'd like to be grittier. They'd like to rebound better. I think Samet Yegitolu not going through any summer workouts and getting there like the first or second day of school hurt him from just an overall strength and development standpoint. But yeah, I mean, people were surprised, but Andy Enfield, I was talking to one of his staff members probably when the roster was set and done and kind of leading up to the start of training camp. And I just said, well, what do you think? And he said, well, all we've done for the last decade is field competitive teams. And I think we can do it. We had the resources to go out and get some key pieces. They missed on a couple that really would have helped them, but they still put together a competitive roster. And I think there's a real focus on development for these players, and the ones that were able to get it this summer really helped them a lot. I think next year there's some excitement because Boopy missed those key games. A lot of people immediately thought he was going to go to the transfer portal and be done. He ends up coming back. But then you have another year of Samet Yegitolu. You have another year of BJ Edwards, who set the single season steals record. That development is something that, that gelling you talked about on the court, they need that full offseason now to get their feet under them and really realize what the staff wants from them. Now they have that. Now those guys can go out and lead the newcomers that they're bringing in and really keep the thing going in the right direction.
I do, before we get into the additions of the departures, you kind of mentioned it. Cario Quindo will be gone. Chuck Harris will be gone. Matt Cross will be gone. There's a couple more. But those are kind of the main ones. I do want to say Matt Cross was probably one of our favorite players this past season. I mean, the shooting, the rebounding, everything, top to bottom. One of the most well-rounded players in the state, honestly. Was it fun to see that? Because we knew he was a good player coming over from UMass, but then all of a sudden it was like, oh, this guy's actually like an integral part of whatever ended up being like a top 50, 60 team in the country.
Yeah, that was cool because I got told in the summer by somebody, they said, man, I've seen a couple practices. I think Matt Cross is going to be the best player. I was like, really? Like, not Boopy, not Chuck, not Samet, who they absolutely needed to be that best player. But they said, yeah, Matt Cross. And sure enough, that hit. And he just, when he was on, and he really had to manage that hip back situation for pretty much the whole season, from what I understand. But it's just tough. And he was able to bring that mentality, I think, to the program, and it finally, for the team as a whole, really set in. That, like, I think right after that North Carolina loss, they got destroyed on the road, and then I think they had just played Duke too. They kind of settled in and they kind of went on a little bit of a run. But man, Matt, his development, shooting the ball from beyond the arc, all the different things he can do on the court, really helped this team. And while they, want another guy like that, I don't know if they have another Matt Cross. They've had to add pieces elsewhere, and so this team's going to look a little different next year. But I don't think Jaden Toombs is necessarily going to be that athletic compared to Matt Cross, but he plays with that high motor that SMU is hoping hits early, and they can kind of get that going and find a way to get him minutes. And they need that motor guy. Like, they need that type of edge. And otherwise they're going to be a little bit more like they were last year, in terms of scoring the ball, because they've certainly added some more scoring and things like that, but they also added some size on the perimeter, which is good. So it was fun to watch Matt Cross, though.
Real quick, at the LSU SMU game I went to, first of all, the seating for like media was like terrible, but we're like up basically in the balcony level, and this dude, this older man, comes up, and it's me and Colin, and he's like, y'all covering the teams? I was like, yeah, we're covering LSU. He's like, oh, my nephew, he's number 33 for SMU. I was like, oh, okay, nice. He's like, yeah, so we'll see if he can do anything today. And we just walked off. And then Matt Cross, I think, had like 15, 16 points and beat LSU. But
it's like,
yeah,
I don't know. He's only been averaging close to a double double. I don't know.
I was like, we'll see if he does anything. I was like, and he just went stat with the whole family over there. I was like, oh, there you go. So there's my Matt Cross story. But go ahead, Ish.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, like, looking into some of the replacements now. You mentioned the ACC, a little bit of a down year. Aside from, obviously, you can probably pencil in Duke, of course, with their incoming recruiting class. Louisville, probably, they showed a lot this year. But it's a lot of kind of uncertainty outside of, maybe, honestly, ironically, SMU. Outside of SMU, you kind of see Boopie Miller, you mentioned Igatolu, and then Edwards coming back, and they bring it in. We can talk about some of the transfers they're bringing in, but looking across the landscape, Will Wade now at NC State, North Carolina, whatever, they're kind of in their last grasp of trying to put together a competitive team to kind of make the Hubie Davis stuff work. Outside of that, like, this is kind of like a decent year to kind of potentially kind of maybe kind of skip the line a little bit, if you say, into making this team competitive. Because you mentioned incoming high school recruiting class, very special, but Jerron Pierre, Sam Walters, Corey Washington, like, they're, in addition to, like, he's recruiting both ends really well, high school and transfers.
Yeah, I think so. And Jaron Pierre, I mean, talk about if people have any worry about SMU being committed to basketball too, I mean, that was quite the get on many levels. I mean, during the regular season, he ended up, somebody posted on our board, wasn't the number one scorer in the country, but they had added the CBA, or CBC.
The tournament?
Which happens after the Final Four. So anyway, somebody went off. I think it was the kid from Nova or something, went off and got the number one spot. But in the regular season, Jaron Pierre, the top scorer points wise in college basketball, and also has some size to him, has some kind of nastiness to him. I think just kind of getting a little bit of a look at him and kind of how they envision him. They know that they needed to add some size out on the perimeter. And I think for him, they can play him a little bit at the 3, maybe 2, and play BJ Edwards at the 2. Last year they played a lot of Boopie, Chuck, BJ, a lot of 3 guard. And I think they know in the ACC, they not that they were surprised, they've coached major college basketball for a while, but you have some of those 3s that are just big dudes that are athletic, that have size, and it's hard. And against those really good teams with the size, SMU kind of faded offensively just enough to kind of take them out of the game. And then, defensively it hurt them too. So they upgrade from a size perspective with Pierre, which is big. And then Corey Washington is a really, really fun player, an all AAC player, a player that, from talking with people up at Wichita, SMU fans are, if there's kind of a transfer bet or a player bet next year to maybe turn into similar to Matt Cross, it's going to be Corey Washington, just from his grittiness, just from his ability to go get the rebounds and get the ball and want the ball on the defensive end. That's important. So he'll come in and provide, I think, a big boost in that regard. And then Sam Walters is kind of this cool unknown. He really hasn't been able to put it all together just yet. Been injured a little bit, but his kind of advanced stats future looks pretty good. And that's a piece of why they wanted to go out and they flipped him from Mississippi State, which is, in basketball, there was this gentleman's agreement where you're not going to go and flip commitments. And now it's just all thrown out the window with NIL and agents. So it's a different world in that regard. You don't circle back on kids, but now you have to because everybody's throwing money around like crazy. But, Sam Walters does get a chance, I think, to play a bigger role at SMU than maybe he would have at Mississippi State. I think he's probably a little bit better of a fit at SMU. So they'll have a chance to maybe bring it all out of him. He was a highly rated prospect coming out of high school as well. So they really like what they got in him, and they feel like they can pull it out of him. Their last year was kind of a group, and not necessarily the guys that were returning for SMU, but the guys that were brought in, guys that were a little bit like cast-offs, like a Matt Cross. Keon Ambrose Hilton was a cast-off. They kind of got him going to Johan Traore, Jarrell Colbert. Yeah. So they kind of brought a little bit more out of some of those players than they had been gotten out of in the past. In particular, Matt Cross. He had been on 2 ACC teams before and ends up at UMass and then ends up back in the league and takes off at SMU. So they kind of feel like Sam Walters might be that next one where they can develop him, get him in the offseason, keep him healthy, and then he really helps their front court. Like if he pans out, then you're looking at a really good situation for them, I think, in the front court. If you consider Corey Washington, his ability to maybe play 3 and the 4 and that being back and all of those things. So, and then their freshmen are going to have to play. Jaden Toombs is going to have to play. Jermaine O'Neal Jr. is going to have to play. They signed BJ Davis Ray, another big guard, 6'6", wing out of California, who they got committed early and then just held on to him until they knew he was going to make it academically. And then Nigel Walls, can he do anything in the front court? He's a little thin, but he's really, really talented. So they've got a really good class on both fronts, and it should lead to some excitement going into next season once again.
Yeah, I think you mentioned, I think there is, or at least just looking at the roster, it feels like there is a bet that one, if not two, maybe even, a few of these freshmen will play significant minutes. Toombs has shot up the rankings a decent amount. I think I remember him like being in the 70s or 60s at one point, I think last year around this time, watching him. Now he's at 38. At least I'm on threes. And then, like you said, Walls, O'Neal, Davis Ray. So I do feel like there is, and it's not like you're putting all your eggs into them. Like they have to be, high level contributors, but they do need to be role players, I think, or at least one or two of them need to be role players, I think, for this team to really reach its potential and their ceiling this year. I'm interested to see Toombs particularly because he is like a 5, but I think he's more of like a 4 because he is so skilled and, at like 6'9" and stuff. So that's probably the one interesting one for me is this freshman class. But I do think that kind of rounds out their roster nicely. Or do you have anything on that before?
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it on Toombs, though. I keep reiterating it, but it's very important that at least he kind of pans out, and then one of Jermaine O'Neal Jr. and BJ Davis Ray pan out. That's just my, Andy Enfield is not afraid to play freshmen. That's interesting enough. There are 2 freshmen last year who were Rob Lanier signees, Chance Puryear and Mitchell Holmes are both back, but they did redshirt last year. Maybe Mitchell Holmes can step into a contributing role. He's got some size to him. He can maybe play like a Johan Traore type of role on the team. And then, maybe Nigel Walls plays like Jarrell Colbert. No disrespect to Jarrell Colbert, but he was just an absolute fouling machine. It was kind of almost comical at times. And again, very, very, very talented, but just has not put it all together. Yeah. And
he was at LSU with Will Wade.
Yeah, LSU and then Kansas State. There were possessions where it would be like 3,000, maybe 50 seconds. And it was kind of wild how quickly it happened. And so if they can get a little bit more than that out of Nigel Walls, that's kind of maybe the role for him being a true, almost 7-footer.
Yeah, Inigo Toglu is the one for me that I'm like, if he can take not even a huge step forward, but if he takes a reasonable step forward, then you have a 7'1", monster in the middle there that can hold everything down on both ends.
Oh yeah, he was. I mean, before he had and this is another piece. You can kind of tie it all back to him not being there last summer, but he had a very clear adjustment to the American game, and he didn't get his chance in the weight room last summer to do anything. He was coming over from Turkey and just got on campus, and by the time you get on campus, get settled, I mean, they were a month out from training camp at that point. So everybody was talking about, oh, he drops the ball down low or this or that, and why don't they do this? Well, they didn't. I mean, they didn't have time to do any of that. I mean, even he got hurt in league play. He had a shoulder issue, and all of those things can be avoided with the whole summer of working out those shoulders, doing all the different exercises that a lot of these basketball players do to keep those things nice and flexible and just healthy. And so this is a big offseason for him, like you said, but he was rolling right before he got hurt. I mean, he was right probably around that 14-point mark on a few games, and 8-9 rebounds, and really putting up points. He could stand to improve his free throw shooting for sure, like a lot of big guys, but he was really starting to catch his stride, and then he got hurt, and then I think Boopy Miller got hurt right after he got back. So kind of a tough little run there of injuries, but that's the fine line, I think, of a team like an SMU versus maybe like a Duke, where you just know you have so much talent. The 9, 10, 11 guy for SMU might not be able to pick up the slack as much there. So it's a little different.
On the women's side, obviously SMU made the splash with Adia Barnes from Arizona. What are the initial, whether it's from the fans, whether it's just from your thoughts or just anything like that, just the initial thoughts on adding her and just what you hope that she's able to do here? Because SMU trying to get the women's basketball, thing going a little bit. What are the initial thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it was a really kind of perfect, very similar to Andy Enfield coming over from USC in a sense, just time for a change, had kind of run its course. The only difference is, of course, Adia was leaving her alma mater. She had taken them to a national championship game. And I just think it was time for her to find a new place. And so it worked out very well. This is kind of like Andy Enfield on, I guess, outside of Larry Brown, but on paper, the best hire this program's ever made. And just showed, I mean, she was making probably $1 million at Arizona, I think I saw, and they were selling out the arena. And so she had a good situation there, but she's excited to be in Texas. I think that's the big thing that she's really honed in on, is recruiting locally. I mean, Jazzy Gibson out of Duncanville, she signs her, and Jazzy wasn't even recruited by Toya Wilson at SMU, which is kind of like wild. Like,
Crazy.
Didn't even get a courtesy visit, and the staff was, I think, in year 3 at that point, which is crazy. But she signed right away with SMU, and was super excited to be a part of the program. And Adia also turned over the whole signing class. I mean, I think it's a full sale. Everyone's gone, all new players in. So I'm still kind of catching up on where the roster actually stands. Looking forward to chatting with her on our pod soon. She'll probably go on with you guys, I'd imagine, and talk as well, because she's been kind of on the media tour. She was down at ACC spring meetings, and I saw she was on some shows. But she just seems like kind of a breath of fresh air. A college coach that has run a major program, knows what it takes to be a major program in this day and age. She has some, I think, cool, fresh ideas for getting attendance under, them a little bit, better. Obviously, winning helps, but also how that attendance can impact the bottom line for the team in terms of, rev share and player acquisition and things like that. So she really seems like she's got a good grip on it. Her entire staff followed her, from what I understand, as well. So a lot of good things on the Adia Barnes front, and we'll see how it goes. I think it's a cool new fresh start for her. And, you guys, I think, are a little bit more well-versed in the women's basketball side on, how exactly it could very well pan out. But I mean, for her to go out and revamp a roster, and she had some good pieces, it looks like, relatively quickly. I mean, people are definitely excited about the hire there. No doubt.
Yeah, I was curious. Just lastly on that, it seemed like a lot of SMU fans, at least from when the job first opened, it seemed like there was a name that was obvious that didn't end up getting the job in Karen Blair.
Yeah.
Maryland coach, Maryland assistant. She ends up getting the Georgia Tech job after the fact. But was it surprising to you as well that they kind of zeroed in on it? From what it looks like, they had a chance to go, talk to Karen Blair, but it looked like Adia Barnes was their target. Did that seem like a shocking move to a lot of people? Because, of course, you mentioned alumni. Karen Blair played there, successful assistant, been around the state a little bit. So it looked like she was primed to be that next, what's the word I'm looking for? Prodigal son, prodigal daughter.
Oh yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I think SMU's kind of followed this path with at least the basketball side, and Rhett was kind of the perfect timing on this. Like, if Rhett left for the NFL tomorrow, I think SMU would try to go after a sitting head coach. I just think that's what they're trying to do, and sitting head coach at established power conference programs.
Sure.
And you look at it from the Jay Hartzell hire, Damon Evans hire, Andy Enfield hire, and now Adia Barnes. And so it was also quite a weird time for SMU athletics. So I really had very little idea of until our own Talia Goodman kind of started breaking the news on Adia. But I didn't really know where the search was going to go because, quite frankly, it's a whole new athletic department.
Sure.
Really, I mean, there were, there's been a lot of changes over at SMU. So I do think they knew they wanted to go for somebody who had head coaching experience. I think as great of a story as it would have been to go get Karen Blair, and it made sense for a lot of reasons, I don't get the sense that she was, the top choice. I think Adia was, and they made it happen and got her on board, because that came together pretty quickly. I mean, what, like a week, maybe. So it moved pretty quickly. And I just think after going through the Toya Wilson experience, she great recruiter. She'd been a head coach at a smaller school before, but hadn't really, I think after year one, there were some people that started to whisper like, I don't think this is going to work. And, for whatever reason. And so this is more of a stable play. Again, you make a statement, going to go get a power conference coach, because I don't think Arizona would fire her. I know she had 1 year left on her contract, and so who knows after that. But they went out and got Arizona's coach and made it work. So there was an obvious name, but I do think in this era for SMU, where they have such a small window to continue to make a positive impact on like their image and their future with whatever is next for college athletics, they want to take a lot of risk out of play. And I think that's why they hired Damon Evans. I think Andy Enfield made a lot of sense. So I think that's kind of why they went with Adia Barnes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's all we got. Appreciate it, Billy. As always, we'll look forward to next year with SMU. Like you said, Andy Enfield year 2. We need to get Andy on the pod. We didn't have him on the pod last.
That's right. He was one we missed out on. Yeah,
so we missed out on him. So if we have any trouble getting in contact with him, Billy, you knock on his door.
Oh yeah. Of course, I live right down the street from
I was gonna say. Go. If not, you go TP his house or something.
Yeah. Exactly. Awesome, guys. Thanks for having me.
But thanks for coming on, Bill. Best of luck to y'all, or to SMU and everything, and we'll stay in touch.
Appreciate it, guys.